And before we get going on today's show, if you haven't bought one of these shirts yet, I love jobs.
Or it's wintertime. Look at this. Dude, I'm not
or
even...
get yourself a damn hoodie.
No. I'm not even trying to sell this thing. It is so comfortable.
You don't have to sell the one off your back.
No, I mean,
there's
like,
more
I'm
not
even like as an advertisement to sell. Like, it is legit.
John, that's a nice Carhartt, but I wonder what's underneath it.
We're not going with that, Barry.
Okay.
It was original. It was good. You just came in and stole it all.
All right.
It was. I liked it. We're keeping yours, John. Don't worry.
Responses, engine 5, engine 3, engine 1, ladder 3, ladder 2, rescue 1. We've got smoke showing. Division 1, you're on location, box 23, reporting smoke showing 727.
Welcome to JobTlks Podcast. Our goal is to facilitate knowledge sharing. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on the show belong solely to the people expressing them. We do not represent the departments, cities, or towns we work for. We need to get into this. All right. Welcome back, everybody. All 3 or 4 of you that are watching the show. We appreciate you.
Hi, guys. Hi, Mom.
Don't forget
my mom actually does watch the show, and
my
I
mom
appreciate
does
it.
too,
Hi,
yeah.
Mom.
If you're watching or listening to this, please subscribe to the channel in which you are taking it in. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. We appreciate you. We have some merch up. It's Christmas time. Ish.
That was supposed to be Jingle Bells. It didn't sound like that.
That was not. It wasn't even remotely close to Jingle Bells.
Barry, you having another moment, or are you gonna
Barry had another Jocko fuel.
Jesus, dude.
He's out of control. He's out of control. So today we're going to talk about generational gaps in the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get started, to set some ground rules is that we are not going to delve into political generational gaps, because I don't believe in politics on this show, if you guys are okay with that.
I'm good. I don't know what political side I'd bring it to anyway.
Like the fact that there's no term limits for senators. Let me tell you something about that.
All right. So,
Sorry.
So I on a serious note, the reason this kind of came to me is I had I don't know if you want to call it an incident recently. So I attended a class, and I had come in the class, and it was like 30 seconds after it was supposed to start, like literally like right on time, but pretty much. Then a couple guys walked in after me, and so the guy who was teaching had said something. It was like, "Oh, at least you were on time" to me, and I was like, "Well, actually, it wasn't. I walked in late too."
Yeah.
Whatever. And I thought it was this like funny, like we were just all having a good time, and then all of a sudden he just like out of nowhere, very serious, not at all joking, was like, "Is that why all millennials are shitheads?"
Oh yeah.
And I was like, "Dude."
Yeah.
So
How old was he?
he was probably in his late 50s.
You know what I asked them immediately after every single person who wants to refer to this generation or that generation as anything less than their own, I just say, guess who raised all the millennials?
Yeah.
Your generation.
Yeah.
Good job. Strong parenting, bud. Take a walk.
Right.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, and I don't want to say what organization I was with, but I was there in an official capacity, so I didn't have the ability to really come back the way I wanted. But like as an almost 40-year-old,
Yeah.
it's hard to like sit and bite your tongue. And as like for me is like, and I've said it to people before, is like, you know, there's a lot of guys buried in the ground of the millennial generation that fought wars for the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And so like that's just taking it personally to my generation, but there's obviously generational gaps within the fire service, and the question is like how do we bridge those gaps? Because so I was in doing research for this episode, it was initially I had said like, oh, how do we close the gaps? And I was listening to like it was like an HR conference. It was actually kind of hard to find stuff about this, but it was like an HR conference, and the guy that was talking was like, well, we don't say we're going to close them because some of the gaps are not closable. Like you just can't come to the same consensus on stuff because of your experiences and background and stuff, but you can build what they said is a two-way street. You build a bridge, and you learn to talk to them and communicate with them, and they learn to talk to you and communicate with you. So I kind of just like I hear it a lot in not even in the fire service, just in life in general, is, you know, this generation or that generation is this or that, whether it's older or younger or whatever the case is. So I thought it might be just kind of a good episode to talk about experiences and like kind of what things we do. The one thing I will say is, like, in that class, I learned nothing that day. I took zero.
Yeah, because you're immediately tuned out.
I took zero away from the class, and if nothing else, being able to bridge the divide that we have, and generational gaps is just one form of bridging divides we have as people in general. Like, we're not all the same. We don't all come from the same places, backgrounds, have the same values, or the same things are important to us. But if we can't at least like bridge the divide and be civil to each other and talk about our differences civilly, then we're going to do a disservice to the fire service, because we're going to have people tune us out.
Well, we're just going to create factions, and then
exactly.
We don't want to create any more factions than already naturally exist in every place in your life, but especially in the firehouse.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things I think is important to remember too, for that individual in specific, I don't know him, her, whoever, is that he doesn't speak for his generation. Probably he's probably just an asshole.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's assholes in every generation.
Yeah.
There's plenty of assholes in mine. Look at me. I'm probably one of them.
The biggest one.
Yeah, we're all living proof that there are assholes in every generation.
And he, as an instructor, also lost an opportunity to make a connection with the students, and that's on him.
Right.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take it to too much of like that person or that class, but it sparked
He's
like
not alone.
it just sparked a thought in my head. And again, like a lot of the show is like our own personal experiences and like how we can build and make the fire service better. And that was one that just kind of came to me as like a topic to talk about. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be a long episode, and I don't think that, you know, we're not out here being researchers and psychologists and things like that. But
I can give you.
Yeah, we're not going to drop. We're not going to drop a bunch of data on you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to drop a little.
Not a
bit.
bunch though, just a little, just a little bit.
No, I mean, I can give you. Again, like I said, you know, I base a lot of like my leadership theory and experience. Again, like the generational gap comes down to like strong leadership and your ability to connect with people regardless of generation under a common purpose. This one being the fire service. But like my experience in the Army, like I'm coming up on 13 years. Like the way that I would initially interact with like younger soldiers 10 years ago is not really socially acceptable, or probably the most effective way to interact with soldiers of today. So like I have to realize that like, hey, like different people respond. And I think that's like navigating like the difference between like being a good instructor in this case or being a good person, or, you know, like navigating this generational gap. But like the way that people respond is different, and it doesn't make them less effective or capable. While like my generation, like I responded really well to getting the dog shit smoked out of me and throwing up on the floor.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily fly nowadays, and like there's other ways of like pulling the best out of people.
And I think that's not even always just a generational thing. Like everybody has a different personality. You know, like some people learn by reading it, some people learn by seeing it, some people learn by doing it, whatever. And it can be hard, like especially with the military thing. Like I'm 100% guilty. You know, you hear it and you're like, God, man, that's like we've gone soft, and like maybe we have, I don't know. And
no,
like
technologically, it's the same difference as like, okay, like if we have someone that, you know, grew up in the city, has zero exposure to saws, right? And then you have like a 55-year-old senior man that's upset that this kid like doesn't know the first thing about a saw, right? But maybe, like you said, the two-way street of interaction to where like he's trying to do Con Ed for EMT class online and has no idea how to like use a computer, and this young kid is bringing something to the table sense like, oh, let me help you with that, and like he's teaching him the mechanical strength of like, hey, this is how to use a saw, and he's teaching him the technological strength. So it's a
two-way street.
Yeah, so get into a little bit of the like technical stuff with generations. First off, it's not necessarily arbitrary, but the like dates for the generations vary on different charts. They're not an exact science. They're generally guided by like 15 to 20 year period where people grew up with the similar experiences. So there's 5 generations in the workplace. I don't think, if for sure in Massachusetts, we don't see anybody in what they call the traditionalist or silent generation. Those were born between 1925 and 1945. So you're talking almost 80 years old, 77 years old at their youngest. There are, I think, places in the country, though, that you could have these in some volunteer departments.
I was
right?
going to say, that's where you're going to see it.
Yeah. I think, wasn't it a captain in Maine a few years ago, was
Like
in his late 60s or
like that.
early 70s that passed away
Yeah.
on a call. So they are there. And I'll show you kind of a makeup of the workforce in a second. So after them are the baby boomers.
Okay, boomer.
This is the only generation officially recognized by the census.
Really?
So, yep. So the baby boomers from 1946 to 1964 is the only generation that's officially recognized by the U.S. Census Bureau.
Interesting.
And then after that is Gen X, 1965 to 1980. Millennials are 1981 to 2000. And then the I guess is not the current generation. There's one after Gen Z. I think there's a name for them. I don't remember. But Gen Z is 2001 to 2020. So generally it's a 15 to 20 year period.
So I'm curious, like, so if the census came up with like the baby boomer, but like all those other like Gen X, Gen Z, millennial are all like common terms. I wonder like who came up with
They're
those
like
ones?
researchers that they're like research groups that delve into this stuff and
Gotcha.
decide. And so like one said that the millennial generation was ended in 1996 and not 2000 because of these ideas and whatever. So it's not like an exact science, it's kind of research group, but in general it's an easy way to kind of cohort people when we talk about, like, especially in the workforce when we're trying to like deliver material and stuff to them. So so this maturus or the silent generation, those are like pre 1945. So that's like Second World War, rationing, fixed gender roles, like rock and roll was just coming in, some different things. That makes up 2% of the U.S. current workforce. And I'll put this up on our social media as well. I had to kind of put this blackout banner because this graphic was really good and I liked it, but it was giving us the percentages for the UK workforce, which were slightly different. So I added the percentages for the US workforce in there. And so like their aspirations and stuff were a little different. They wanted home ownership. They were pretty disengaged with technology. They felt like jobs are for life, so they weren't switching around.
More career driven.
Yeah. Signature product in their generation was the automobile. So think
owning
about
a car.
what we have now. And like that was the signature, not the newest Tesla or whatever. It's just
GMC
the automobile. They communicated with formal letters. So you talk about like finding all these letters back and forth from like World War II, which is pretty cool. And they communicated face to face with face-to-face meetings is what they preferred. Baby boomers, those are now actually only our third biggest population in the workforce. So this is like Cold War era, born post World War II. They had like the Apollo moon landings, youth culture, Woodstock. They were very family oriented, and they make up 25% of our workforce. Their aspiration was to have job security. So, you have to imagine that you're guided by the experiences you have in life, and then by the experiences the people before you had. So when you grow up and you're like, oh, we had no money, blah blah blah, that kind of bleeds into stuff too. Yeah. They started kind of adapting to early IT. They very organizational. Careers are defined by employers. Their signature product was television. They talk by telephone, and they still prefer face-to-face communication. But they will telephone and email if they need to. Next is Generation X, and so one of the interesting things I found is like I was listening to like I said, some of this like talk, and they were saying that like you could technically fall into the range of, say, a millennial or Gen X or baby boomer or whatever, but because of the people that raised you, your experiences could be different, and that your mentality is really that of a different generation.
Sure.
So again, it's not like an exact science. I feel like I fall somewhere between Generation X and millennials. So this is the end of the Cold War, fall of the Berlin Wall, introduction of the first computers, mobile technology. They believe in work-life balance. They're digital immigrants is what they're talked to. So this is like the and I read a thing about a micro generation called Zennials, where it's like they had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood, so that's like migrating into digital life, and I kind of liked that. Early portfolio careers, loyal to profession, but not necessarily to employers. So this is where you start like, okay, I want to stay in this one career field, but I'm not necessarily tied to an employer. PC is their big thing, email and text messages, the communication media, and that's what they prefer. Gen Y is the millennial generation. So this is why does this say? Oh, born in 1981 to 95. So, all of these dates are born in, not the period of time. Yeah. So they actually experienced 9/11. They have like video games like PlayStation, the rise of social media.
So Gen Y is the millennials.
Gen Y is the millennials. Yep. And then they want freedom and flexibility. They're digital natives, so their whole lives have been digital. They're entrepreneurs. They work with organizations, not for organizations. So kind of that differentiation. Especially between like the maturists, which you can think about like when unions were first starting to take rise and like, you know what I mean? You didn't work with anybody, you worked for.
Right.
Text social media is a big thing. They prefer online communication. Gen Z is born after 1995. So this is like economic downturn, global warming, mobile devices, things like that. That only makes up 3%. They want security and stability. They're very well versed in technology, career multitaskers, so they can move in between different careers and employers. They have like signature products like Google Glass.
What's Google Glass?
Nano computing. It's like those glasses you wear that look at stuff and will like look up Google. So,
jeez.
Yeah, see, we're a couple of generations behind here. 3D printing, things like that.
It's interesting because I'm closer to being a Gen Zer than a Gen Y.
You think that maybe they should have started?
Yeah, but it's all about the part of the reason they changed that is that the very defining characteristics. You know,
you think maybe that they should have started the generations at A so they could got
got
got a couple hundred more years out of it. We're already at Z, so
they prefer to communicate via like FaceTime. And this is something you see all the time. Like you see people walking around literally on FaceTime on their phone.
Yeah, it's different.
And so then they say solutions for making decisions will be like digitally crowdsourced. So they bring in
which you see all the time with all the GoFundMe's and everything like that.
Yeah.
So I will say I was never a big FaceTime person until like the last little while of my life. However, I think people. I don't think anyone is hard and fast in any one of these categories. Like, because my grandma, for example, like FaceTimes, has an iPhone and is like, you know what I mean. So
it's not that they don't adapt. I think it's just like it's the majority and like preference. Like but
for me, like with FaceTime, for example, like I use FaceTime because I would rather get as close to like a face-to-face conversation. Like of all these, like I would much rather be in person. But like if I can get closer to having like a face-to-face, like more personal interaction, like that's why I do stuff like that.
Yeah. I've told you before, there's only like 2 people I answer my phone for, and Barry's like one of them.
Yeah.
Or FaceTime. I hate FaceTime.
It's awkward to me.
I hate it with a passion.
But it's great for like if you want to see your grandkid or something.
That's
cool.
The only thing I like is like my wife will FaceTime me at work to see my kid.
Yeah.
And that's not as bad, but like talking to another adult in FaceTime, way out. Don't like it.
I'll FaceTime you later.
Like occasionally, like, used to somebody have a problem and like, oh, FaceTime me and show me. Like that's a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox, you know.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, I feel like I fall a little bit between Gen X and Gen Y. Like the personal computer came into my life, when I was like in high school. Not that it didn't exist. I just had no real.
I'm a baby boomer.
Yeah. And I prefer text. Like I would like to talk to you face to face.
Yeah.
But I hate talking on the phone.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've told you this. I do not like talking on the phone.
Interesting.
I don't think you understand. This could just be like a social anxiety thing. I literally like when people call me is like a physical reaction. Like I don't like, you know what it is like, I feel like you're put on the spot. So anything they ask you, you have to answer right then. Any whatever, like where's a text message, I can look at it, I can think about it, I can go back and answer on my own time.
Even when I call you?
Yeah.
You're like, what if you ask me a question?
Yeah, no, I don't like answering phone calls. Hate it.
Interesting.
I know what you're talking about, but I've gotten to the point now where like I understand that you don't have to have an answer for somebody. So if you're not sure how you want to answer the question, it's easy enough to just say, "Hey, listen, I gotta think about that for a minute. I'll get back to you."
That's
Doesn't
part of
matter
it,
what the
but it's
question
not
is.
that's not the overarching. It's just it's the commitment.
I know what you mean.
It's a commitment. Like if I pick up that phone, I am committed to you for as long as you need. Maybe I want to take a nap.
Especially if
I don't
it's
wanna
that,
talk to you on the
especially if
phone.
it's that like person that
Or-
always asks you for money or something. It's like, oh, damn.
Yeah, I prefer like text message allows me
Interesting.
to have my freedom still and just decide when I want to communicate with you.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like I love everybody here. I use the Barry. I think is literally the reason I use the phone, because Barry's
call
got
me
me
all the
into
time.
it. Huh?
You call me all the
No,
time.
I know, but like I will with my close friends. But outside of that, like I know the plumbing company's calling me, and I see them call me, and I'll decide to call them back. I know it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, whatever. It is what it is. One of your ticks.
Yeah,
That's
and
not a thermal imaging camera. Not that kind of tick.
Yeah. Yeah. One of
I know speak to very good.
those ticks. Nick, you have something to say?
I do. I it's nothing fire service related, but with regard to the phone texting thing, I don't know if it's because I'm incredibly sarcastic with a lot of the stuff that I say, and I don't know. I've been told by friends, a lot of friends, that they don't know how I mean something when I say something over text. I personally use proper punctuation, but in young people
That's
now,
aggressive.
it's rude or you're angry when you put a period at the end of a
yeah.
sentence.
Yeah, it's aggressive.
I love talking on the phone because I leave no room for interpretation when I say what it is, and I have the opportunity to say, well, what I mean by that is XYZ.
Where do you fall into this generation chart here?
94 I was born. So
you're a millennial, just on the very end of a millennial.
yeah. So like the internet was invented the year I was born. We had computer lab, and the computers were all Windows, gigantic box
So
computers.
when I was in high school, we were typing on typewriters was a class
oh, typing class. Yeah, we used to
on
have,
typewriters, not computers.
We had the same thing, except it was typing class was with a keyboard on a computer.
Did you play that game? It was like the typing
Which
game.
one? There were so many,
so
and they
many.
were
I thought
so
you were going to say the
nostalgic.
Oregon Trail.
Yeah,
was a
I
great
did.
So
play Trail.
we had a computer in I don't remember if it was middle
Fourth
school or high
grade,
school, and there were two games: Flight Simulator and Oregon Trail. And
Right.
you
Both
literally
games.
ran to the library to get in line
Yeah.
to get your 10 minutes to play whichever
Yeah,
game
yeah,
you wanted to play in the morning.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
No, but I thought that was very interesting because
It's
texting. If I say like IDK, it could be like I don't know.
yeah.
But if I'm like, actually, I don't know, like especially when you call me for something media, really, right?
Yeah.
If I just like IDK,
Yeah.
you'd be like, what?
So-
But if you were talking to me on the phone, you go, hey, can we do this, this, and this with the show? I can be like, actually, I don't know. I can find the answer though, and I'd be happy to get back to you.
Yeah,
as
it's
soon
a
as
totally
possible.
different response.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know that my not liking phone calls is generational or if it's just like a personal like social anxiety I have. But either way, like these things exist. So in the firehouse, I mean, we see this stuff all the time. Like I just had a conversation with someone recently, and we were talking about doing some training with brand new people, and like it seems to be a little bit more difficult for them to do some of this hands-on stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said to me is like kids growing up do less and less hands-on things, more and more digital things. So you have to bring them out of the realm they're comfortable with and into this realm. And in our job, you have to be able to figure out a way to do that because you can't digitally put your SCBA on.
Yeah.
Right. You have to physically.
You have
do
to
it.
create ways, and this is like we said, it's a two-way street. For the senior members, even those like middle members, and then like our young guys coming on, like you have to create opportunities to make a connection, and that has to come down. Like if individuals are walled off, whether on the younger side or on the older side, and they're not willing to kind of collaborate and meet in the middle, that's where the experience is going to be lost, and the fire service is going to be poorer off for it.
Yeah, and I think there's like adaptability in the department. So like I think you'll see it, places roll out classes online and some people are like, yeah, sweet, I can do classes online. Some people are like, yeah, I can do classes online because I can just skip ahead to the test.
Sure.
And then there are people that are like, why aren't we doing this in person?
Yeah.
And I think
And that's me. Pretty much.
And I think that you have to strike a balance of, obviously there are classes you shouldn't do online. Like,
right.
I mean, if it comes down to it, the podcast, right? If you want to look at it, it would be like an online class almost. Like,
yeah, right.
Not that we're teaching, but
No.
you're gaining information from an online platform.
Yeah.
But you can't gain all the information from this. Like, I could watch a video. I'll give a perfect example. We talked about doing some rope stuff a few months ago with bailout kits, and we talked about doing the Kelly Byrne method for lowering somebody on your kit. So I watched videos of that, and I tried to figure it out, and I sort of saw it, and then I reached out to the lieutenant of the rescue, and he's like, oh, if you want to do anything, let me know. And I was like, actually, I would love to do this. And I'm telling, as soon as you put, I was like, oh, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Like, it was so easy. So in I could be different than you, where you could have picked all that information up and actually known what to do.
No, I think
I would have been in your boat.
Yeah, you have to strike a balance, and you have to figure out a way to communicate with every member of your department. Because here's the thing, I don't care if you're a baby boomer who hates millennials or Gen Zs who thinks baby boomers are whatever or this or that. That's not the point. The point is that all of us exist.
Yeah, right.
Period. End of discussion in the workplace, and we have to find a way to progress the fire service and work through these generational divides and gaps. And like I said, we don't have to close them.
Mm-hmm.
You can firmly stand in your beliefs.
I think it's as important to seek out the senior man or the senior officer in the firehouse to pick their brain as it is important to, if you have downtime in the winter, to get on the interwebs and use that as a repository of information too, right? So an example of that, I personally benefit way more from hands-on training. And I love shooting the shit with senior members and just soaking up as much as I can from them. But I also know that it's beneficial to me to get on YouTube and just watch reading smoke. Cause there's not enough fires for me to really take it in and absorb it.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you can go on YouTube and watch the, NFPA smoke reading class where there's all of a sudden there's 100 buildings in front of you with different velocities and densities of smoke. And then I can kind of create when I see that in real life, now I have
you can equate it.
Okay.
Got it.
So that in and
Or
of
for the
itself
winter.
is a generational gap,
Yeah.
because we, as a fire service, used to see a lot more fires. And so some of the older, more senior, I don't want to say older, more senior members, more experienced members might have that experience of reading smoke and been able to do that. But the only way that you can continue that now is not the only way, but supplement is through that.
I also think the digital based format is really good. Obviously we're a Northeast podcast. I think it's really good for the winter, right? When you can't get out in the drill yard, there's a couple feet of snow on the ground, it's cold out, it's icy, you can't throw ladders. But I can go on Vector, whatever resource, and just watch some videos for the times where weather is not working in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we were down south where you can just be out in the drill yard all day, 365, I would do that. But I think it's a cool resource. If you're up in Canada, right? Where there's it's negative 30 degrees out, we can't have guys outside.
Right.
But you can watch a ropes class and then do some stuff inside together. Make the best of it,
Yeah.
So I think it's a blend.
One of the things I had read or heard was that is that
your plumber?
It is my plumber, actually.
Don't call him back. Call him when you're ready.
See, I have an excuse right now. One of the things I'd heard is that the more senior people want to be respected, and the junior people want to be heard. And everybody wants to be respected and heard. But I think that's when I think I listened to it. It made a lot of sense, because I feel like senior members feel like younger members don't respect their opinions and experience because they've never had them. And so it's important to let the senior members know that you do respect and take value from the experiences they were able to have. And then I think as a senior member, it's important to listen to a junior member who might have a totally different perspective of the world.
Right.
And we had touched on this too, when you're maybe it was the Building the Best Job You Ever Have episode, I think. We talk about getting in and training people, right? And you train somebody, and then maybe they or maybe you're the senior person, right, and they don't know it, and they're showing you this tool. Instead of being like, oh, I know how to use this, you listen, because they might have a totally different perspective than you, or a totally different experience. Or
well, the good news is, or maybe the bad news is, like, this is a tale as old as time, right? You had the guys and gals in the 20s looking at the kids in the 40s being like, oh, these kids don't know what they're doing. They don't know their ass from their elbow. And then those kids from the 40s went off and defeated the Nazis and the Japanese at the same time and saved the world.
Right.
And then, 20 years later, those World War II vets were looking at the Vietnam guys like, these kids, all they do is smoke pot or do whatever they do, and and then they fight in Vietnam.
Right.
And then actually, what I mean? So it's just like it's a
Yeah.
never ending. And
Yeah.
I think we have to be collectively be better at realizing, like, hey, there's always going to be a generational gap, and it's just like the last generation always been like, whoa, when I was, what I mean?
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
you all have to realize, like, you have to create those opportunities for connection, or else those experiences and like pearls are going to be lost.
I also feel like as you get a little bit older, you maybe are more fluid through what are typical generational ties. So like as you learn, you're like, oh, they were right about this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you gain some knowledge and like requisite like life experience. You know what I mean?
I mean, even now, like, I'm getting old. Like,
5 years from now, you won't view a lot of the things that you look at now the same way. You just won't, because your experiences are going to teach you otherwise.
Yeah.
Or they're just going to change your perspective a little bit. That's
Yeah, and then now imagine that you have this person that's coming onto the fire service in their early 20s in very formidable times. Was that same 5-year gap that changed your mind? You know, like it might, or whatever the case is. Like, and they experienced it as a teenager, and you experienced it as a 40-year-old or whatever. Like, you're just going to take it differently, and because you're going to put your own beliefs and values and life experiences into determining like how you feel about a certain thing,
right.
into it. And it's interesting, and like I had asked one of my buddies from my old department to come on today, because we've had some pretty good conversations about not specifically saying like generational gaps and divides, but like we've had the conversation about, you get newer kids that come on, and I call them kids, and they're not always kids, right? I got on the fire service when I was 28 after military experience. They're not always kids, but you get younger people that come on the job and they don't know what they don't know. And like, how do you motivate them to go out and throw ladders, to go out and search with a thermal imager, to go out and do these things, especially when fires are down and the majority of the job is EMS, and they're really good at that job. And they're like, I'm good at my job. Yeah. But you have to almost convince them that this does happen, and when it does happen and you don't have that experience, it's that much
and I think
worse.
that's something. This was probably from way back when, Johnny, when you were saying, like, looking at each generation as being like a subject matter expert in different things, where like we look to these guys as experts with fire, but then that completely switches with EMS, where they're looking at us. I think you had mentioned that. In a
we
previous
did.
episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who have mentioned that, because back, I would say the guys now who are approaching retirement age, they're in their last like 10 years or so. Some of those guys are basics, and some of them went on to become paramedics, and they're like the first paramedics that we had. And so that's what we've all noted, is that a lot of these guys like, hey, no, you're the expert here, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. You guys all went and got educated in this stuff, and then they laugh and they go, I'm just a basic. What I mean? They laugh and they're like, I'll just let me know when you need CPR. You know what I mean? But they're looking to us for direction in the things that we're doing. In that medical I was telling you guys about the other night, I had one of our senior lieutenants on, and he was just like, hey, what do you need? Right. Now, you put us at a fire, and I'm going to be looking at him like, hey, what are we doing here? What do you want me to do?
And that's super important, is that like I feel like that's the mutual respect, is I'm not ashamed to admit that you know more than me about being in fires. Right. And in fact, I'm happy that you do, because I can...
Keeps you safe.
Yeah, I can learn from you, be safe by your experiences. And then the flip side of that coin is that they have the mutual respect for you, that you have experienced a totally different side of this as your primary function in the fire department. Right. And that applies to like, I think that is a generational thing in and of itself, but that applies to like the generational gap as a whole. Yeah. One of the things I was reading about this, and it actually specifically talked about this example, which I was kind of happy about, because I feel like I hear it a lot, is some of the more seasoned guys get upset when there's overtime and that people don't want to work. And, you know, it gets perceived that some of the younger generations are lazy. And this thing was actually talking specifically about that, and that the values are different because of the experiences that shaped you, the different wars, famine, or not famine, like, you know, depressions, like whatever the case is, that the younger generations value that work-life balance a lot more than the older generations who believe that you are dedicated to your employer. And so, like, just little things like that. And it's like, if we can just learn to see, like, hey, I'm not lazy. I have these beliefs and values because of the experiences that shaped me. Or maybe it was that, you know, my dad worked all the time, and I was like, you know what, I want to separate that a little bit and spend more time doing these other things, whether it be hobbies or kids or whatever the case is.
Right.
Like, that stuff is important to younger people. Not that it's not important to the older people. They just have a different value system sometimes, and that's, again, probably brought on by the parents that raised them. Like you said, like, no, you go to work and you work. You know what I mean? And I just think that it's interesting, and, like, as a fire service, it's really important. Hey, Nick, can you do me a favor? Sorry, I think you have the firefighter success book on that.
And I think that's like, it brings up an interesting point. So, like, I always try to highlight that younger kids have to, not that they have to do more walking in the door, but to be competitive.
Have you guys ever seen Nick? Hi, this is Nick.
Nick. To walk in the door, right? Like, these kids now, they have to probably get their EMT, they have to get their paramedics. So you know that they want to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, like, the things that we talk about doing. So, like, previous generations where they went to, you know, 1 or 2 fires a week to where they have all this experience, versus, like, us talking like, hey, I want to go to FDIC to, like, broaden my horizon to soak in more, which they probably weren't. They were like, hey, you go to work, you do your thing, you go home, you take care of your family, versus us, we're like, hey, I want to interact with people from Seattle Fire, from all these different departments, to, like, soak up that knowledge that maybe we're not getting on the street.
Right.
So like you said, like, I think there's pros and cons to everything. And I think that leveraging everyone's individual experience and capability is what is gonna.
I think there's obviously EMS and the fire service, they go hand in hand. You can hardly separate them. There are some departments, obviously bigger departments, that have them separated, right? But, you know, especially in like a smaller town like Stoughton, on a smaller job where we have, you know, you have to be dual certified, right? So you have you're a paramedic, and you're you know, you got your 1 and 2 for fire certifications, right? And probably some sort of hazmat. It's probably like, what? It's just what's the level that
Operation
you operation? No, it's not operations, is it? It's just
operational level responders, what they get in the academy.
Okay, all right. I thought it was just called responder level. So how do I become a good firefighter when I'm so concerned about missing something on an EKG or not making the right call on a medical? You know what I mean? So it's like, let me just put my head in those books for a little while, right? Meanwhile, I'm not looking at YouTube videos of smoke and things like that, because I'm like, my day in and day out, my bread and butter are chest pain calls.
Right.
So it's like, I got to get good at those, right? So it's difficult. It's different. You know, I know that, and this is not to put down any EMT basic or anything like that, but back in the days of, like, just straight BLS, it was like, get in the bus. If he needs oxygen, give him oxygen.
Yeah.
Put the pads on him if you think he's going to code. You know what I mean? It's really basic life support. So it's just it's kind of easy to get a handle on that.
And even the basic life support of today is different from the basic life support of
of course it
20
is.
years ago.
So that is a gap in itself. Like, how do you balance that?
Right.
You know, and some people before us, they didn't necessarily have that. They didn't have to balance that. They could really just concentrate on fire stuff.
Right.
And so that makes it difficult. And
I think, again, that's where, like, the whole two-way street is like, you know, you have those conversations, and the EMS one comes up in the firehouse all the time. There's just a divide in between the EMS, and I don't even really want to get into it.
I wonder
but
if there's
it
an
just
episode
exists.
about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think it really hits as hard on, like, that divide as much as it does. It's just, like, you know, what EMS is. But, like I've tried to have conversations like, listen, I 100% understand what you're saying. Just, like, I'm not complaining about doing the job. Like this is like, but this and this and this could be better. So again, it's just if you can open up the two-way, if they can respect your opinion and you can respect their opinion, and then you can work towards a
common solution.
Yeah.
Then that's where it is. And so maybe this is a good part to read this quote. So shout out to John Talon who gave us this book, Firefighter Success.
Shout out to Jim Moss for writing the book.
For Jim Moss, yeah.
He's made a few appearances on the show.
There were two things that came to mind when I was doing this, like putting this together, two quotes. One I put up on the thing and one I forgot to. But so this is in the change chapter. And this is change or die, right? And it says, firefighters are not satisfied with status quo, and yet they have a difficult time navigating the ever-changing fire service. However, if we are to be successful, we must embrace change openly and quickly. As we discussed in Chapter 1, being coachable, successful firefighters are those who are teachable. Big John, one of John's big points. If we're teachable, it demonstrates we're open-minded. If we're open-minded, then we're able to understand the why behind the changes that we are confronted with. If we're able to understand, then we can finally accept change and really adapt. So although this is mostly, the chapter is mostly talking about actual like physical things like PPE and EMS coming into the fire service and whatever, I thought it was really applicable to the generational gap. Is like if we can understand the why, if we're open-minded to each other, then we can embrace each other and each other's viewpoints, and we can create common solutions that allow us to build the two-way street between generations, have the conversations, and ultimately, as a mission-oriented, like, no-fail job, we can get the job done correctly. And then the last quote is also from this book. I forget what chapter it was in, but it just says, ultimately, our profession is about serving people. In order to serve, we must be able to connect and interact with all different kinds of people on different levels. And like, if that doesn't hit the nail on the head about breaching any, not just generational divide, any divides that we may have, like, we as a job are here to serve people. And if we can't like interact with people on with different backgrounds on all different levels within our own firehouse, we're never going to be able to do that out in the public. So starts with us, and like, you know, I think these are just good conversations. I had actually signed up to go to, and it got canceled. I was sad. New England Fools had they were putting up a lecture on it. Speaking of, so I had asked a question online. So sorry, I'm in a book and then in my phone.
I think technology was one of the biggest answers.
Yeah, so that was one of the.
I did see the post that Rusty Ricker made.
Yeah, so he said technology. A couple people answered. So technology would be my obvious answer. Less obvious would be traditions. Huge gap between those who are into the job and those who are fire department employees, which I think can be generational for sure. But he even says that age of that last gap is fluid. So you get people that are more seasoned or more experienced that are there just because it was a decent job at the time, and you get people that are into the job, whatever.
But if the leadership and culture is there, you can take people that are fire department employees and make them into the job.
Yeah, and he said it's not old versus young the way you might think, and I 100% would agree with that. And again, like generations is just kind of a loose term for putting people in cohorts so we can try to understand how they function and operate, which helps as a society and as a business to do things correctly. Another one said that this person said being part of the younger generation is general knowledge of household tools and how to use them. He said he was fortunate, but not all younger people are brought up building things, working with their hands.
Right.
But they might be more into how computers work and have a better understanding of modern technology. There's so many things people can devote time to, it's impossible to learn them all. He said he grew up building a treehouse with some of his friends, didn't really touch tools, but the same friends could build a computer or code, you know. So everybody has value, regardless of generation, background, whatever the case is. It's up to us to find it, because we have to build that common ground within ourselves to be able to effectively work as a team when this is a team-based sport, and to go out and ultimately be mission successful.
Definitely.
So that was it. I mean, just a quick talk. Just wanted to kind of talk about that. You know, obviously, like I said, we're not psychologists or whatever, but I think it's important to, if you don't acknowledge that there's an issue or that there's a potential issue, you can't work towards a solution for it. So acknowledging the fact that there are gaps in generations and values that are different, just kind of allows us to move forward, I think.
Definitely.
I think that in general, you know, I think it's really true about the fire service is you get a lot of type A personalities. I think we all kind of sit on that same common ground. And not everybody in the firehouse is going to be that way, but I think a good majority of people, you know what I mean? And so, there could be, a little bit of pride getting in the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whereas
absolutely.
like you have somebody, maybe he's only been on the job for a year or two, but he's showing you how to do something. You're like, who does this kid think he is or something?
Right.
And then you have, but it's like, well, he actually really knows what he's talking about. You know what I mean? So
Right.
setting aside, pride and things like that. And like you had mentioned before, keeping an open mind, you know what I mean? So that we can all communicate and interact with each other. I don't have an issue taking direction from anybody that knows what they're talking about. You know what I mean?
100%.
I stole this from Barry early on because he would always say that I respond to strong leadership, and I find that I'm the same way. There is I just had something. I just had something good that I was gonna drop something on you.
Little knowledge bomb.
And then I lost it. But just being able to learn from from anybody that you're working with. That's huge.
Yeah, just being open-minded that you can learn from them regardless of their...
And you should never stop learning, even if you're... Yeah. I hope when I'm 60, 65 years old that I take the opportunity to...
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just stagnant and dying on the inside.
You got to be... I learned this lesson early on, and like my old man would just be like, I don't care if you don't like that teacher,
Right.
It doesn't matter. But you can take something away from him or her. You know what I mean? There is a lesson to be learned. There is some kind of knowledge to be passed down.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So just keep that in mind while you're sitting there sulking in her class because you don't like her. That she does have something to teach you.
Right.
So if you don't like her, at least learn something.
Yeah, I fully reject the excuse of generational gaps, and I think Chief Eichels had said the same thing. You see people that blame the generational gap. To be clear, I don't reject that there are generational differences. I just reject using that as an excuse for not being good.
I was going to say, that's because when I brought it up to him when he came in, he shut it down very quickly. Like, I don't know where exactly he sits on it. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I think he said, I fully reject the idea of it. He said, there's nothing that I can't take someone and show them.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think, but that's like on a very personal, like base-to-base case where it's like, yeah, but not everybody can listen and learn from everybody, and you know what I mean? So it's like it's almost like I agree with like what he's saying, but I don't know if I agree that it's like not actually a thing. And I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't know if that's what he means.
It's not that there's generational gaps don't exist. It's just that if you use that as the excuse for why somebody's doing something, and you haven't, like, the younger people don't want to do this. Well, if you haven't taken the time to try and do that, then you're equally as at fault. And
there has to be a solution. So you just have to find it.
And even if it doesn't work, it's not necessarily always because they're younger or older or whatever.
Oh.
So
is what it is. I mean, like you said, like you just have to create the opportunity to make a connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. No, it was a good topic.
Yeah, that was it. That was all I had. So, unless you guys have anything else.
No. But that I was going to say that that data that I promised you, Will, wasn't going to drop on you. That if you take a minute to look at the slide that has all of that information from generation to generation and everything on it, take a few minutes and look at that. If you're listening, if you can find it on our YouTube channel, or maybe we'll put a post on about it. But
we'll put it on the social media.
It has a lot of good and interesting information, and it might help you out in realizing where kind of some of these disconnects may be.
Exactly.
And so you can kind of see where you can start building that two-way bridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in again.
If you're working, stay safe. Enjoy the holiday.
We will see you guys next week.
And don't forget about the I Love Job shirts.
Oh, yeah.
I love job shirts. I love job shirts. And with that, because I can't speak English, Job Talks out.